So you want to learn how I make music? Well, first you gotta be a 90s kid and play way too many educational PC games along with a comical amount of GBA, PS2, SNES, DS, 3DS, and whatever S games with soundtracks that have absolutely no right to go as hard as they do. A bunch of my favorite video games were on cartridges, like this. They didn't have the storage space to cram an entire soundtrack onto the thing. Instead, they utilized a collection of much smaller, compressed audio samples played back in a sequence. And the best part? You can extract those samples and use them in your favorite music software. I use FL Studio for my music, so we'll be using FL for the remainder of this video. If you want a crash course on music theory, I recommend this video right here by Andrew Huang. Link is in the description. So this is FL Studio's interface. It looks kind of daunting at first, but I promise you it's not that difficult. Over here you got the channel rack, the pattern list, and the playlist. This is the browser, where you can find samples and sound fonts. Anything you put in the folder named Collected in the FL Studio installation folder will show up here. There are tons of sites online where you can download all kinds of sound fonts, sample packs, or whatever to make your music. I rely on video game sound fonts, instrument samples ripped from the music banks of all these different video games that I like Ace Attorney, Star Fox, even arcade games. So first things first, if you take a sound font or a sample, click and drag it over here into the channel rack, it creates an instrument. I use sound fonts, so when I import them over to the channel rack, the plugin that it uses is the Fruity Sound Font Player, so get used to seeing this a lot throughout this video. If the sound font you put on the channel rack has many different patches or banks, you can select them by clicking on its name. Now, this will look slightly different in newer versions of FL Studio. I use a legacy version of FL because the older sound font player works a little bit different. The sample reproduction is a little bit better in the older versions. Once you have an instrument in the channel rack, make sure this button is turned off. It's not yellow, see, like that. Click right here, and it pulls up the piano roll for that channel. Now you can just start clicking notes into place. You can resize these clips, move them around, change the velocity. Or you can double click it and change all this stuff like the pan, the pitch, and some other knobs that I don't care about. Now what you just made is called a pattern. You can click a pattern and put it into the playlist, which is essentially the final song. Over here with the pattern selector, you can add more, rename them, and put them on the playlist. Let's add some more. You can click on any pattern here in the playlist and then click somewhere else to duplicate it. You can even grab this little paintbrush tool right here and just go. I wanted to break down one of my pieces of music so you can get an idea of how I compose my music. This is Objection Funk. Objection! The most popular piece of music I've ever made in my life, and also the most repetitive. No, seriously, the song only goes between two chords, the 1 chord and the 4 chord. That's it! That's hardly interesting and egregiously repetitive in the worst way. When I started it, I literally just took this drum kit here from Sonic Advance 2 and went. That's literally how I got it started. It's the funniest little thing. So let's break this down. First off, of course, I've got the little donk. This is a nice little donk sound. I love that sound. To keep the rhythm, instead of using like a 4 on the floor kick beat, I went with a hi-hat on every and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I had another hi-hat as well. This one right here. But this one's kind of subdued. It adds a little bit, but I don't know. I could have left it out. I didn't. And then, of course, I needed a bass line. And I couldn't think of a bass line, so I went looking through all of these different instruments, and I found this one right here. it sounded like it was in B flat minor 7. This is a B flat minor 7 chord. You have the 1, the flat 3, the 5, and the flat 7. So I made my bass line around B flat. A very simple bass line that I embellished way too much during the chorus. I don't recommend doing this because it sounds way too crazy. The more uniform you keep your bass line, the more grounded it's going to feel in the final product. You can embellish it, make it funkier, make it syncopated, but don't go overly crazy like this. Too much sometimes is just too much. For the melody, I added these. It's a really grungy synth sample from the ocean bass levels of Sonic Advance 3. They all have really different dynamics on how they sound, so I mixed and matched them however I felt. I just found an idea that I liked, and I used that as my main melody. For the chorus drums, I wanted it to have that really grungy, recorded in a garage sort of sound to it. So I added another one of these drum kits from Sonic Advance 3 with a lot of these dirty drum kicks and hits and stuff, with a snare on every second beat. And when you mix that together with the original drum lick that I made, I added this little... This goes back to like the first Sonic Advance, I think. It goes as far back as Sonic Advance 2, at the very least. So if you don't play the whole sample, it sounds like it's a perfect fifth. So right here is B flat. It sounds like it fits with... So I had it play from the 4th to the 3rd, to the flat 3rd, that is. And then you get this nice little... And it kind of sounds like somebody's actually playing a real rock organ, which sounds really nice. You don't have to have all of your notes be perfectly centered on the beat if you wanted to have that really dirty, played by a real person feel to it. And that's exactly what I did with the solo section right here. Let's pull that up. All of these little hits and stuff, to make it sound as natural as possible, I actually offset some of these notes from the beat to make it sound less robotic and perfect. So it sounded more like it was an actual person playing on a piano. Now, when I made Objection Funk, I was still really learning how to make music. Now that I've improved, I told myself I want to make a sequel, but I want it to be better than the original. So I took one of the sections from Objection Funk, the original, and I looped it and sped up the tempo a little bit, and started iterating on a nice idea. I gave it a bass line, with a falling cadence with the chord progression. Now, mind you, this is not funk at all. This is like 90s house or something. This is not funk at all. Anyway, I took this idea and I kept tweaking it and revising it until I found something that I was comfortable with. I'm gonna skip all the iterations in between and we're gonna just skip right to the 31st iteration of it. I I changed the chord progression somewhat from the original. Instead of a purely falling cadence on the bass line, I instead went with a 1, flat 7, 4, 5 chord progression. And I broke my own rule and started going crazy with the bass line again, and I added this bass line right here, which is inspired by the original Objection Funk, which in itself, its bass line is inspired by Chemical Plant Zone from Sonic 2. Now for this one, I wanted it to have a more flowing melody. Something that you could actually, hum, sing, something that can get into your head as easily as the Star Wars main theme or something like that. So I started with the chord progression first. And then I tried to write a nice flowing melody to it. For each one of my songs, I try to incorporate a 4-part instrument structure. First off, you have your bass. Aside from the bass, we have our accompaniment. Our melody. And our drum kit, of course. For the hi-hats on this one, I actually used a little bit of a trick. These are noise generators. This noise generation sound font emulates the noise generation capabilities of the sound chip on a Game Boy Advance. And I can use this to make some interesting sounds. If I play around with these envelopes on the sound font right here, which we saw earlier in the video, I can actually change the dynamics of how this instrument will play. It changes the effect over time, such as the attack is how long it takes for it to reach full volume. Decay works in tandem with sustain. Sustain is how loud the sample will play as you hold down the key indefinitely. Decay is how long it will take for the sample to fall to the sustain level. And release is how long it will take for that sample to completely deaden after the note is finished playing. If you play around with these, you can actually make it sound like a real instrument, like a hi-hat. See, now it sounds like a hi-hat. And if we make a simple pattern with this and change the volume for each note, you get a hi-hat. Another cool feature of FL Studio is slide notes. Say I have this little C note right here, and I want it to slide up to C6. I can place another note here, double-click on this one, and change it to a slide note. You click on this little button right here to turn the slide parameter on. Hit accept. And yes, it works in reverse as well. But what if I were to apply that to one of these noise generators? Here I have one open, with a note starting way down here, and a slide note all the way up here. And that sounds like this. I did it in 2 different channels, and I copied one of them and offset it by 1 semitone so it doesn't sound exactly the same in both sides. So you get like this stereo whoosh effect. So, those are the basics of how I make music. It's nothing crazy, nothing fancy. I just throw whatever at the wall until it sticks. Whether or not that works for me, I'll leave that up to you to decide. I'll be following up this video with one on how I make YTPs. That video is going to be members only. That's right, I have channel memberships now. If you don't want to miss out on future behind-the-scenes content, consider becoming a member. Don't forget I also have a Patreon and a Bandcamp if you would like to support me in other ways. It helps out a ton, and I always appreciate it. If you like this video and would like for me to make more, tell me what you would like to see from me in the comments. Until next time, I'm iteachvader.